So I would entertain a motion from committee members when they're ready.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Item number 1 under old business is authorization to award bid to John Plott Company for the pedestrian bridge, build pedestrian bridge over Jack Warner Parkway. The contract total is $10.6 million. Tyler, welcome.
Good afternoon, council. So here, just to kind of continue the discussion on the pedestrian bridge, real quick, just to refresh everybody's memory, going to quickly go through the 3 options we discussed last week. Look at the funding sources again that we have on there and just kind of answer whatever questions you may have and just go from there.
And remind me that you're about to get to it, what those three options are that we are going to consider today.
Yeah, so again, the 3 options we discussed last week, number 1 would be accepting the bid as is. That would require additional funding of a little over $4.5 million. The actual adjustment to the budget or funding won't necessarily need to come until after the Riverwalk project is bid. But there are some funding sources available that we've laid out there that we would look for that money from. Option number 2 would be to reject and rebid the same scope, which could bring potential for lower bid prices, but historically has shown that does not happen. Oftentimes they do go up. Bid option number 3 would be to reject and redesign the bridge in the hopes that reducing scope to something less than what we have now would bring bid costs down. And then there's a few options there of more aesthetic items that could be reduced if that option was taken.
Tyler, before we have committee member questions, just one little data point that I think is really important is I want to spend a few minutes just talking about the grant requirements, because one of the struggles that I have had as a committee member or committee chairman member, whatever, is that because there is a grant with the federal government tied to this, that causes our movements to be a lot less than in a normal environment. And I think that I want to gain a better understanding of that, and I'm glad Carly's going to step up and kind of talk about that a little bit. But Carly,
Preemptory, totally preemptory.
you are so ready. I want you to talk a little bit about the grant, about the $5-ish million that was allocated to this in the grant, what our requirements are, and if we decided to rebid, reject, or whatever, what happens?
Sure.
Or what are the things we have to deal with, please?
Sure. So, so the build grant alone was $15 million. Within the build grant, there are 3 different components. The first component that's kind of before you to be considered is the pedestrian bridge. That one component is allotted $5 million of that $15 million grant award. Now, the federal government does look at these specifically as different components, and they will obligate the federal funding as these completely separate components. However, they also look at the build grant.
Federal funding for each of the 3 components completely separately?
They do, yes, sir. So like within our grant agreement, we specify that we're only putting this much towards the pedestrian bridge, this much towards the Western Riverwalk, and this much towards the moorings of federal funding. And that our match then gets allocated as well throughout those 3 components. So they do look at them separately. However, because it is one grant in total, they look at the grant itself as an overarching project. So the components have to get done according to the grant agreement. That ergo means that the entire project gets done as compared to the total overall grant agreement. Both items have to be met, or else we will lose the grant.
I have a question, please. When you say, and by the way, my compliments on the ergo. When you say all components have to be completed as planned, is that?
Yes, sir.
Quote that right? So, how is the pedestrian bridge looked at as a project? Is it looked at a bridge, or is it looked at a way to get a bunch of people from this side of the street to that side of the street without anybody getting hurt, and it being visually appealing and consonant with the overall project?
Excellent question.
Is it the purpose or the structure that is being evaluated as did it get done?
Sure. So FHWA will look at it kind of both. They will look at it as the purpose needs to be fulfilled, absolutely. We do have a certain amount of, it's going to be built in this way that we also have agreed to per FHWA standards. However, I will tell you that what we have designed has a lot of extra frills on it that are over and above what FHWA requires us to do for a pedestrian bridge. So yes, there are bells and whistles that are attached that if we were to take them off, they would still meet the scope requirements of the grant. But also, so to go through the three options and then the ramifications of the grant according to those three options. You know, option number one was to, basically reject and rebid. So if we rejected it now and then rebid as the current project stands, that's fine. You know, we have a certain deadline for deliverable of the project and then to be able to spend all of the money that's allotted under the grant. We have that deadline, but that timeline does not seem to be in a crunch mode if we were to reject it and rebid. One of the other options would be possibly to do scope reductions, so value engineer. And as long as we maintain per FHWA standards that the pedestrian bridge project does meet the scope that they've laid out, we still have some, like I mentioned, we have some areas that we could value engineer down. I think that one of the options that might be on the table is possibly to not do the pedestrian bridge. What that would require under the grant would be a major scope change with FHWA. And I mentioned this to Mr. Crow yesterday, but I can tell you that I am almost 99% sure that FHWA would not grant that scope change. That scope for the pedestrian bridge was a large portion of what our grant application and agreement was based on. And if we were to not do the pedestrian bridge, we just said completely to scrap it. We applied for a scope change. They denied the scope change, but we still could not meet the obligation of the grant. We would then have to give up the entire grant, the whole 15 million.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, questions from committee members?
I wish we could see a timeline from when this grant was awarded, just like we did with the Benjamin Barnes YMCA, to see how this project has been moving. Because in my district, I'm hearing a whole lot of concern about the work that's being done in the area. And I see that we have tabled it at least 2 times. And I want to be able to communicate to the constituents of my district, this is what the scope initially was. This is what happened to the scope. This is where we are now, and this is what we project for the future. Because I get questions about this, and initially on, there was some concerns about we were doing so much in other places that we would come to this point that we would need more money for what we really want. And I hate to say that it seems, we gotta find more money to do what it is we really wanna do. So from my perspective, Mr. Chair, I wanna know the timeline, how all this stuff fit together. And Tyler, we've been talking about this for about how many months?
It's been a while.
That's what I thought, yeah.
And as far as calendar timeline, I know this is only part of what you're asking for. Calendar timeline, we've shown that a little bit in previous presentations.
Right.
As far as laying out some of the federal requirements that we're required to meet that we don't necessarily have on a typical project, and laid out some of the dates on there. And I don't have that slide in this presentation, but we laid out, when we met the requirement to meet procurement requirements for our design professional and, get our NEPA document approved, which is the environmental review, and our
Right.
certifications and our
And I
design
think those things are
submittal.
important for constituents who are not in the room sitting at this table, but they are sitting, listening to us communicate back and forth. But they're gonna ask me about it.
Right.
Tyler, this, to back up his question though,
Mhm.
this pedestrian bridge that is designed, that we are looking to approve, not approve, whatever, is the scope, the look, everything about this is the way that it was originally proposed. That's what we are looking to vote on, correct? Or has that been changed since we started this process?
So as far as the original proposal that was in the grant application, really all that was included was a rendering of, hey, it's going to be a pedestrian bridge that's going to go basically from point A to point B. For this particular project, just because of the timelines of when it became, or we became aware of it, and that we needed to apply for it, we didn't get to do a long, thorough planning process that we would have preferred to do. So
And that was because, remind me, I think I'm having a memory here of why. Because it was a very short time frame that we were told to apply for this grant. And the turnaround time on that was very quick, was it not?
That's
That we
correct.
could
It's
get
2
the grant.
weeks.
Am I remembering that right?
that's correct.
It was like 2 weeks?
Yes, typically when these grants are released, you have about a 3 to 5 month window between when the federal government releases what they call a NOFO, the Notice of Federal Opportunity, and then the actual application deadline day. Obviously, the NOFO was released in their normal period for the build grant. This was 2020, so we can all remember what was happening in 2020. And we were told from some of our, state delegate contacts to begin working for application 2 weeks prior to the deadline.
Carly and Tyler, based on your best memories of this, when this grant was applied for and the $5 million was allocated roughly to the pedestrian bridge, based on where costs were then, which is dramatically different. What percentage did we think that would cover? Did we think that 5 million would cover that whole bridge that we're looking at today, or did we, or was that just, I mean,
Well,
what
the
was our
original estimate
expectation?
Was 6.2, we thought it would cover 5/6
Yeah, but-
of the cost.
Right,
Correct. So
seven,
when
whatever
you
that
get
number is.
when you get the grant agreement in, you have the $15 million total grant, but then you also have your required match amount. So per component, you kind of like apply this much federal dollars and this much match money to each individual component.
But it was a substantial, the point of my ramble was gonna be, it was supposed to be a substantial part of what we thought this was gonna cost.
This was definitely more than a third, a little bit more than a third of the total overall grant costs. That we knew that.
What other questions?
I don't have any
So-
questions.
Yeah, I want y'all to, yeah.
Well, we don't have the ability to predict inflation or the state of the market, so, but what I'm hearing is we probably need to go ahead and go forward with this and try to locate the money as fast as possible. I mean, because we can't stand to lose the grant, the big grant. So what I'm hearing, we have to do all three projects or none, right? So, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I know we can go around
I
the
don't
world.
disagree.
Yeah.
Tyler, or whoever, part of this, talking about reduction, how much approximately would you reduce the cost if you took off RGB lighting?
$3.78 million, right?
That would be the entire electrical package.
Okay.
Would be roughly the $3.2 million, which would mean we would have absolutely no lights.
I mean, you
on
have
the
to have
bridge.
lights, but
Right.
or one of these others, I mean, of course, maybe all of these are essential, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a little difficult to tell an exact number. In the bids we received, we had to kind of lump the entire electrical package under one line item. So we had, the roadway lighting line item had an amount, and that was the entire electrical package. It wasn't broken up into RGB lighting, white lighting, conduit, wire, things like that. So I can't tell you an exact number if we were to take away all the RGB lighting. It could be in the $1 million range if we were to take all of it away. But I don't know
You'd have
exactly
to
what that would
replace it
look
with
like.
something, though. They would have to have lights.
Some of it would need to be replaced to replace some of the white lighting, correct?
Tyler, if we took the option that is don't award, redesign, and rebid, remind me, how would the redesign take place, who would do it, and how long would it take? And I ask that, we're gonna be okay on this project no matter what we do, all right? Came in way over estimate, but we have got the money, it's gonna happen. But somebody down the line, one of us sitting at this table down the lines, districts, is gonna get left out in the cold at some point. So if the
That is
bid
true.
came in 75% over the estimate, is that pretty close? We're 6.2 and 10.5-ish. We're either gonna have to have 75% less stuff or 75% more money for somebody at this table not to get left out as we go through what we've got. We've got it for the, so what would be involved in a redesign? Time-wise, who would do it? But still oriented at meeting the original component of the bid to get the money, but on a less grand scale. We're going to have to shrink our appetite some or get more food.
Yeah, it's a great question. So as far as who would do it, TTL is our main design consultant for the bridge. So they would lead the effort of redesigning and working through what that redesign would look like. As far as what would get taken out and how much that would be,
Well, that would, I'm not asking that question
Yeah,
yet,
yeah.
because I assume that would, how much time, is that a 2-month process, a 2-year process? Put me in a ballpark of what sort of hiccup that involves.
it would be in terms of months, probably single-digit months. The holidays would probably slow things down a little bit. So assuming if we started in January, I would think probably a few months, depending on exactly how much we were looking to redesign. The bridge as a whole wouldn't change. The foundation structure to support it is going to have to stay the same no matter what.
And
The bridge
also,
itself is going to stay the same. It's going to be some of these more aesthetic items that would take less time to redesign.
so Mr. Busby, let me say, my community, this was a part of the initial building the Western Cluster. As I'm flipping back through news articles from 2020 from Senator Shelby and reading Tuscaloosa News from September of 2020. And I'm gonna say this, to shortchange my community will not go well with my community. And I'm gonna be very blunt and say that. If we want to show some type of continuity, context, and building up a community, the framework, the foundational framework in which this was initially done, we've done a whole lot of other things, and now we're coming back to this. It's just Matthew Wilson thinking. Sitting at this table today and listening to everyone talk about what happens, because we also have that $5 million from Elevate, correct? In this
That's
money?
our match money for the
Is
grant.
that match money? So I'm gonna say, I do not want to decrease what is needed for this bridge for my district.
I'm confused. I thought this was for Tuscaloosa, not District 1.
Well, but it is in District 1. And there are some things, Mr. Feld, that are in your district that I support because it's in your district. But yes, it is for all Tuscaloosa. Like there are parks in your district, but they support all of Tuscaloosa. Just like this
Right, but
pedestrian
you're saying
bridge.
Matthew, and I don't wanna argue with you.
Okay.
But when you say, you're saying that this is just for District One, and it's not.
It's for everybody, you correct,
Right.
but it is in District One.
Well, yeah,
And so therefore, I'm speaking in terms of District One, in the context. Now, if I was speaking
I'm still
to,
confused, I'm sorry.
I believe I'm being as explicitly direct.
So I do want to point out, as far as Councilor Busby's concerned, eventually we may run to the point with the funding, somebody else's district doesn't get a funded project. At least for this project, the funding that we've identified, none of that comes from another project.
And
It's
that's
all
good.
contingency remaining, it's
I understand
project
that,
left over.
but this money, while it doesn't come from another project, would have remained available if, once we start the Western
Something
River
else
Walk,
is
or one of the
overrun.
other ones,
He's right.
we run into cost overruns, which
And you are right
shouldn't
about that.
surprise
Yeah,
any
you're right
of
about
us. That money, while it doesn't come from other projects, unmolested for the pedestrian bridge, it's there for other projects when we run into these jaw-dropping overages and bids.
And to kind of speak to that, and I know that council is aware, but just to reiterate that, that if we were to award this specific contract, we wouldn't need a budget revision now. There is budgeted amounts within both the grants and the match amount to fully cover this contract. However, when the Western River Walk bid comes in, we will likely need to come back to the table and do at some point some kind of budget revision, possibly from these funding sources, to be able to add to the project overall. This is the first component that has come to the table, and so that is the one that we have in front of us and that we can deal with. We have budget fully available to handle this one contract. It is going to be when the next component and then the next
Right.
component kind of come in, that come to the table in negotiations on the dollars specifically will come into play.
Mr. Tyner.
Yeah, Tyler, let me ask you this question. We talked briefly about it last week, you and I. You think this project was lowballed a little bit, that it's really didn't come, it's not that much over, it's just maybe we estimated it a little lower than we should have?
I do believe the original estimate was lower than it should have been. Again, part of that was the quick turnaround between kind of the notice of, hey, you guys need to go apply for this. And part of that was April of 2020, and
Right.
Right.
half the world
Well,
was shut down.
Yeah.
And I'm sure not, I mean, I'm not being critical at all.
Right.
But I think we agree that maybe it was lowballed a little bit, so it's really not as much over as,
Right. It was
In
hard to
rea-
get
in
people
reality.
to answer the phone in April of 2020 to say, hey, what do you think this would take? What do you think this would cost? And TTL certainly did, the best that they could at the time with the short amount of time we had and the information we had. But that's just kind of where it's at. Jason,
I just
you
think
chime in
that's-
on that a little bit?
Jason, welcome to the hot
The
seat.
bad
Yeah. Ooh.
So, I've said this to Tyler, and I said it to the mayor, and I want to say it to the full committee. I personally take responsibility for the way this budget was developed. TTL definitely does too, but like Jason Walker, we're in the crunch. We had, like it's been mentioned, 2 weeks to not only come up with these budget numbers, but put together a grant package about 1.5 inches thick, come up with renderings, of which we had a team put together to do, to then get renderings 2 days before the grant was due, to then see what we're supposed to put a price together to submit. That is an excuse, I guess, but ultimately I would take responsibility for it. In hindsight, is the number low? Probably so. If we'd have bid it in 2.5 years dollars and without the inflation we've had and with multiple contractors bidding the project, I'm not so sure the number was off.
Right.
But that is the reality of where we are. So anyway, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I just wanted to, I don't know if Tyler was feeling like he was getting pressure on budget or anything else, but that, I would take and I know you weren't being critical, but I still want to just
I'm
give you
really
some
not
context.
critical at all. It's just
Yeah.
that I think these numbers are real. I mean, I don't think they're that off.
Well, and the market showed us, when you don't know till you go to
Obviously
bid,
Right.
Right.
and there's not much competition right
And I
now.
hate
We're seeing
Jason,
that.
what was the design mission? All right, and was it design a bridge,
I get it.
or was it design a way to get people from these beautiful $50 million centers on this side of the road to this beautiful Central River District Park on that side of the road safely and make it aesthetically integral to the project? What was the mission? And I asked that,
Yeah.
I'll spoiler alert, I ask it because in talking with some other organizations, they have said their utilization rate of pedestrian bridges has been abysmal. And I think we've got some of those in this cities where when it involves walking up something to walk over a road, instead we have people darting across the road.
We've
What
got
was-
one we're gonna tear down. for
one we're gonna
$500,000.
tear down, and I think one out there, anyway, what was the design mission?
Let me say two questions it sounds like in that. One, especially as it comes to Jack Warner Parkway and the Riverwalk itself, going back to the 2003 master plan, there was a lot of community input to say, we need some grade separated crossings. We looked at Queen City Avenue, we looked at further down on campus, and the university at one point had considered that below McCorvey Drive at the time. There was no natural element on the north side of the road and south side of the road to get to the north, so we had some benefit to getting up and over and connecting versus, at least in this case, we're not going up, over, straight back down. Those kind of situations, like a Skyland overpass, I mean, that's got some guardrail that kind of makes you want to go over the old school crosswalk there, but in most cases, those are not utilized. We think this is a good location in that at least on the upper side of where the Saban Center will be, you're going to come up kind of at grade and you keep going. So as you're
So if
coming,
you're coming out of the Saban Center, you're not going down and then climbing up, you're walking
at
straight
grade,
out.
you're coming out a little bit, and you'd have to go out of your way to not use it. And likewise, coming from the north, you'd have to cross under the road. We'll make some landscape barriers and things to where it mentally says, yeah, my best case is to cross the road with the bridge. But the thought process, and even down, it is crazy. Within that 2 weeks, we also did a benefit cost analysis that had to be submitted with a grant application. You're looking for points in these competitive grants, and one of those, if you can really show life safety components that eventually equate to lives, dollars, et cetera, that grade separated part of it. It wasn't just how do we get from point A to B. It was point A across Jack Warner, give an actual bridge, and then get to point B. So Federal Highway may or may not go back and look at that, like Carly said, but at some point, if not just subjectively, then in the numbers of the way we probably scored points was providing a bridge across Jack Warner.
I will say one thing about the two existing ones and ones we torn down. They were built when there was no busing, before we had busing of kids into schools, and they were packed by when I was a kid, because they were utilized. But then busing comes through every neighborhood, so there's very few that walk anymore to school.
What other questions? Because I have a couple comments I want to make before we talk about this. But I do want to say a couple things. This committee, and I believe our council, has spent a lot of time trying to look at this and say, what do we need to do? And I would say for me personally, this is a difficult vote. Based on the cost overruns, I think we all take this stuff very seriously. And we're able to absorb this. I am more inclined to support this because of the issues with the grant and the stuff that could be unintended consequences if we don't get this grant. But I will just like to say this to my fellow council people and staff and whoever else is listening. Going forward, these cost overruns are going to be very, very difficult to fund without major changes in scope, or some huge amount of money that comes out of the sky from somewhere else. We can look at value engineering, we can look at cost savings, we can add cash to it, which is what we're going to do, because I am prepared to make a motion to approve option number 1 today, unless I hear different from this committee. But I think going forward, we all need to be very, very cognizant that it's going to be very difficult to continue some of these projects as stated without changes, because the funding is not gonna be there potentially unless things change, unless there's a change because of the economy. I'm gonna be an optimist that there may be some better pricing coming next year, personally, because of things I see in the economy every day at work. But right now, we are where we are. And I don't feel like rejecting this is the right thing to do. And I am willing to I am making a motion to approve option number 1 to
Second.
accept this bid.
Second.
And then I want to open up discussion before we vote. Councilman Busby, I want to see what y'all think about it.
I've asked the questions,
Anybody else have any
I agree.
other comments? Mr. Tyner?
I'm ready for it.
Anybody?
I'm for it.
Yeah, like it sits.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Option number 1. Thank y'all. Carly, thank you.
Thank you, Carly.
And thank you, Tyler. And thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Falling on the sword is appreciated in this committee. I'm kidding. Item number 2, approval of minor public works contract for tree and stump removal, total of $4,000. Selvin, welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, council.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm a little bit disappointed. I want to see the same enthusiasm for my $4,000.
I vote no.
That was,
I'm sorry, I can't get up for stump.
would you like for us to reject this?
I would
Is
like
that
to-
your
for there to be-
recommendation?
I would like for there to be some on edge about it. And I can feel like I've really said something important to sway you in the right direction.
I wonder if you would like to remove it personally.
This is not going well. This is not going well. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, this is actually a request for approval of a minor public works contract for removal of a tree at the reference address of 2704 8th Street. It's in the right of way. This tree is ultimately in fairly good shape, but it is creating problems for some rooftops in the area. And we're concerned about roof damage from the large limbs moving forward. So we agree that this tree needs to come down for that reason. We solicited quotes. Your packet shows the quotes received for it. Aspen is the most cost-effective on it. Again, and that amount is $4,000.
So when we're 27th, is it on the west side of both Lurleen and Wallace's?
It is, yes, sir. It is 27th Avenue, about a half a block north onto 8th Street.
I'm good. Motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion.
Thank you,
Don't
sir.
say what?
Motion carries.
Y'all messed me up. I want to
That was
see a
it.
timeline.
Mr. Tyner does not have a vote. Item number 3, approval of engineering agreement with Gresham Smith for Garner Road Sewer Project, total 410-080. Brian, welcome.
Thank you. So Garner Road Sewer is a section of sewer south of city limits. There's a map of it. The landmarks on the right side of the screen would be Lift Station 42 off Hargrove Road. And on the left side of the screen, this goes all the way to Bear Creek Cutoff Road. So what's going on is we had an assessment performed in late 2021 and got those results back, and we have significantly tuberculated and deteriorated ductile iron, large diameter ductile iron pipe, and this is an engineering contract to go in, review video, develop a bid package. It includes construction, administration, services, as well as assessment of Lift Station 42, which we expect to be deteriorated as well. That wasn't covered in our previous assessment. But again, this is 4 miles long, 4 miles from Lift Station 42 to Bear Creek Cutoff that we're looking to address. We do have this budgeted in the 2022 B Water and Sewer Bond. So,
Any questions, Mr. Gurney?
So moved.
I have one, and I'm actually sure there's a good answer to something like it. It's south of the city limits,
yeah, it is. Yeah,
so it's not in the city limits?
correct. it's a transmission line, so it's downstream
It
from
goes through my
Mercedes.
district.
It does.
Okay, that's nice to know, but.
Well, you gotta take it somewhere.
It's the logical
Yeah,
gravity.
yeah.
It's the terrain.
Go ahead, please.
It's the logical place to place a line based on terrain.
Because crap flows down here.
I think that the answer is that it's still our asset, regardless of whether it
That
sits
too.
within our city limits, it is the asset that we built with our own funding, and therefore
It's
we
there.
own it and we're required to maintain it.
Thank you. Here we go.
It would be a lot cheaper to fix it than, Brian, am I correct? And of course, Kimberly's the one that I discussed it with. It's a lot cheaper to fix it than change it completely.
Right, we're approaching this with the expectation that we can rehab majority of the line, meaning we can not dig it up and replace it. There will be spots where we think once we get into the engineering that we will have to replace it, but again, we're in initial review of everything. We think that we can rehab the majority of
And
it.
it is budgeted.
It is budgeted.
Okay, I think there's a motion.
Moving seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is authorization to enter into professional services contract with Evoqua.
I almost
Get
said
that right?
Evoqua.
Yes.
Evoqua, I'll say that again, Water Technologies. It's a service odor control program for lift station 215, 33, 40, and 41, not to exceed 465,000. Kimberly, welcome.
Hello, this is the contract that we do every year, and I'm a little hoarse, so you'll have to excuse me. But last year, we had to break it up into 2 contracts for funding reasons, but this year we were able to budget the full amount appropriately like we were supposed to. So this is just renewing the contract for this year for those 5 lift stations.
Is it the same money when you double it?
Yes, sir.
Remind me.
And,
Okay.
and we pay $465,000 a year to keep it from stinking, so.
Yes, but we've actually been underrunning those numbers, but yes, sir. And we're working on, so 40 and 41 directly affect lift station 42. And so, as Brian mentioned, we're looking at some evaluations with 42. So ultimately, the goal is that as we start repairing and replacing some of these stations and mains, that some of these will drop off the
Were
list.
they having problems at 42?
I haven't,
No.
I will say this, Kimberly.
No, because of
The-
this.
I have not been getting phone calls about 42, and someone asked me if it had been repaired, and I wanted to tell them yes,
Showers.
but I didn't. But thank you for keeping the phone calls down.
Kimberly, it's in the budget.
Yes, sir.
Motion.
Second.
Motion, moved and seconded, all in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. I need to get control of my own meeting. Item number 5, approval to enter into professional services contract with Chambliss King Architects for design services, Benjamin Barnes Y. The project total of $675,000. Welcome, Mr. Grammer.
Thank
Welcome
you, sir. Thank
to
you.
the hot seat.
Yes, sir. So on October 11th at the committee meeting, we were approved to enter into negotiations with Chambliss King for the professional design services for the Benjamin Barnes YMCA. It was approved on the 18th at City Council. And so we have been in contact with John Chambliss from Chambliss King and have received that proposal. And it is a full proposal for architectural, civil, structural, electrical, mechanical. We also have geotechnical services, construction material testing, special inspections. It's a full design service package for $675,000 that we would like approval to enter into that contract.
How does this compare to our budget, John?
We had $750,000 budgeted, and so we're at $675,000. We are going to have to do some more professional services for the resurvey, rezoning. So we'll have to use a little bit more of that $750,000, but right now this contract is under the $675,000 that we had budgeted in the overall project.
And this puts us on schedule for completion of that project when, in the next year?
It will be
Or
2024, December 2024, yes, sir.
December 24.
That's correct.
Questions from our committee?
So, at the bottom of the first page, Jonathan.
Yes, sir.
and on down about midway into the back page is, it looks like the components that add up to the 675, is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Where it, now moving up, so from the 10 million total project budget,
Yes, sir.
where will we be at the approval and adoption of this 675? What, there's 10, y'all took what out?
Yes, sir. So the overall budget from this is not in there, this was in our previous meetings.
Okay.
But the 10 million breaks down to the 27.5 for the visioning study, the 454.2 for the owner representative. We had 750 for design services, professional services, 8 million for construction, 568,300 for furniture and information technology, and then a $200,000 contingency to reach the $10 million. And the funding comes from the 500,000 out of Elevate funding, and then 9.5 million out of the fiscal year 2022A bond fund for the 10 million total funds. So we'll still have 8,768. We still have right at 9 million left out of the 10.
Okay, thank you.
So
Any other
moved.
questions? No.
No,
Moved.
no question.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries, thank you, Jonathan. Is there any more new business to be brought before our committee? I believe Ms. Kimberly has something she wants to update us on, please.
Counselors, there was a email chain that went out to y'all earlier today, and this is about an ongoing overflow that we have at manhole 6978, and this is on the Mercedes line off of JVC Road. This is a project that we have had in the works since 2020, and it was a major washout in the area, and so we have been working with engineering, and we're close to, we're in the final stages of engineering on that project. However, we've had a catastrophic failure out there, and so we are actively, we're working with John Plot Company to try to stabilize everything right now. So there is an active overflow happening, but we do feel like it's contained in the hole that is in the area. We've done sampling out at Cottondale Creek, which is where it drains to. We've been working with ADEM as well. And then we are in the process of getting things started for bypassing. And so hopefully by Friday, the plan is by Friday that we will have all the flow off of the line so we can do an accurate assessment of that. If you go out there in the area, you'll see that the traffic control is already starting to happen out there so that we can prepare for this assessment and then subsequently for the permanent repair for this project. So I did just want to give you an update on what's going on out there in that particular area, and that we're aware of it, we're working on it, and it probably will be, media's been out there's been pictures and stuff going around and that kind of thing.
How long do you think it would take
For the,
to complete it?
we don't have an estimate on the, we don't,
Estimate all now?
no, sir. Mm-mm.
Kimberly, do you have any idea what caused this?
It was just a catastrophic pipe failure at the manhole, which we've had deterioration in that area from where it washed out a few years ago, and so we have been trying to limp it along until we could get through to a full engineering phase to completely reroute the line. But this is just a few months ahead of where we are from the project standpoint.
What is impacted?
So far, everything seems to be okay at the moment, but ultimately it drains, this would, if it is leaving the area, it would go to Cottondale Creek, which ultimately would end up in Hurricane Creek.
And this is taking waste away?
Yes, sir. I think I'm understanding what you're saying. It's coming from Mercedes, Lift Station 10, that area, and so we're having to bypass around that area, and this is the line that goes under the interstate
And it's taking it to where?
to the wastewater plant. It's actually taking it to the line that Brian talked about.
Okay. And so right now it's building up in that depression, potentially spilling over into Cottondale Creek, and Cottondale Creek feeds to Hurricane Creek.
Yes, but everything seems to be holding right now. I mean, there's still some going in the pipe and that kind of thing. I mean, it's not just all of it.
Okay.
And then, and we are sampling, and we've done samples. We'll get sample results back tomorrow. We have been working with ADM, they're aware of this, and so. You have anything else to add?
It's contained in that hole, it's
Yeah.
not, visually, it doesn't appear as possible. Sounds like you're doing everything you can.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, just keep us updated, that's important, and as quickly as we can get on that, I know y'all are working diligently to kind of do that, but thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for Kimberly? Any other business to be brought before our committee? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Our next Public Projects Committee meeting will be 2 weeks from today. We will not meet next Tuesday. It'll be November the 22nd, Thanksgiving week.